Hello, everybody, and welcome to our first of 4 webinars around human risk here that we're hosting from Mimecast. My name is Rob Junker. I'm Senior Vice President of Product and Engineering over the Insider team, but today my topic is going to be broader. I'm going to be discussing human risk. The first series in this webinar, we're calling The Future of Cybersecurity, Building a Unified Human Risk Management Strategy. And over about the next 40 minutes, we're going to go ahead and first welcome you all to 2025, but reflect a little bit on some of the changes that happened both at Mimecast as well as in the industry in 2024. And then we'll dive deep into the challenge of human risk. We'll discuss how to implement an effective strategy. And I promise this won't be a boring webinar. We're going to jump into product and actually show human risk mitigation at work through products and solutions. And then finally, we'll take a couple minutes for Q&A here at the end. Now, I'm joined by a wonderful group of Mimecasters today that are also helping me with today's webinar, and I apologize in advance, but we recognize we're not going to be able to get to every single question that comes up. So please, during the course of the webinar today, if you have questions as we go, please use the Q&A feature, and I'll have a number of Mimecasters who are working alongside me today to answer those questions. With that, let's dive in. Now, first, I want to welcome you to 2025. We made it through what was a crazy 2024 where we saw so many changes in technology. You know, the advent of generative AI really came to fruition this last year. And today we have a lot more of those collaboration challenges that resulted through those changes in technology. Now, in 2024 itself, not only had changes in the industry, but we here at Mimecast had huge changes too. And I just wanted to take a moment to reflect upon some of those great things that happened. And in 2024, we were very committed through innovation and getting to this human risk strategy through a number of acquisitions that occurred. In fact, we had 3 separate acquisitions that occurred during 2024. We kicked off the year early with our Elevate Security acquisition, which brought us a new way for us to view human risk, as well as a way to measure human risk on an individual user basis. Later in the year, we acquired both Code 42, which is where I came from, as well as Aware, to pull together the best-in-class insider risk management technology alongside the best-in-class collaboration protection technology as well. All 3 of these solutions now feed into our human risk strategy, which we'll be discussing today. The other thing to mention too is we weren't just innovating as it relates to our human risk strategy. Right in our core base of email security, this last year, we spent a lot of time working through advanced business email compromise. We brought together a series of powerful technologies, NLP, AI, and others, to allow us to be able to have higher efficacy in the way in which we protect our users from the phishing and malware attacks that they're constantly under. Well, any of you haven't had a chance to take a look at our advanced BEC capabilities, please reach out to your representatives here at Mimecast. We'll be happy to show you this technology at work in your environment. But let's transition to what we also heard in 2024. And what we do is obviously have these conversations with CIOs and CISOs across our industry to understand some of the challenges that people are running into. And across the board, we heard a couple common challenges from all of our advisors, as well as the organizations that we work with today. The first is that we've heard now loud and clear, attacks always trend towards the most vulnerable vector, which is now the human. We've come a long, long way since those days when we were attacking endpoints and we were attacking networks. What we've gotten to now is that the human that sits behind the machine is a lot easier for attackers to gain access to. And it means that now they're going directly after the humans that run these devices. The second thing that we heard is that security teams do not have the staff nor the time to address the risks that they're already facing. I think everyone can actually get on board with this one, but across the board right now, IT and security teams simply have too much that is coming their direction where they can't even deal with some of the highest challenges that are coming their way because they're strictly focused on operating and controlling the most critical risks that they have in front of them. The third thing we heard is attacks are becoming a lot more sophisticated and hackers more numerous. This, with the advent of generative AI, really gave way to things like deep fakes or using AI to generate very personalized phishing or malware attacks against individual users, which means as that sophistication goes up, we also need our users' sophistication and awareness to go up in tandem. And finally, what we also heard is that trying to maintain a baseline for a secure culture is very tough. Users deviate from best practices. I think we all have a bunch of policies in our organization today where we ask users to behave and operate a certain way. And the reality is right now is that users are choosing different ways that they can do their job. In fact, using tools that are unsanctioned. They're sharing things in not necessarily the safest ways for your organization. And we all know right now that we've got to make sure that they follow those best practices so that all of the security posture that we've put in place, as well as the controls to protect them, are honored. So as I bring this all together, I heard this quote the other day that hackers don't hack into networks anymore. Hackers don't hack into endpoints. Hackers log in with the very credentials or access that a human provided them. Now, this statement's a little bit of tongue in cheek because obviously we all know that hackers do still come and attack the networks and endpoints. But I think this statement highlights something as we think about human risk, is that the focus is quickly shifting towards attacking that human that sits behind the keyboard, who makes mistakes, who has human error. And now we need to make sure we're doing a better job of protecting those humans and preventing the risk that they represent. Now, we discussed this a little bit too, but at the same time, if you take a moment and take a step back and you think about all the tools that are in your business, collaboration has definitely changed. It used to be very simplistic collaboration and email that we had between organizations. And now from an insider risk management perspective, see more organizations that are collaborating through, Microsoft OneDrive or Google Drive, or they're sharing files through shared instances of Slack and Teams. And it has definitely changed the way in which we work. Also, data has changed. We've gone from very file-based data now to numerous SaaS tools that are up in the cloud, as well as collaboration that we're doing through those tools, and just the raw shape of the unstructured data that in our organization has changed as well. But the catch here is that humans haven't. We are still the same people that sit behind a keyboard, and now we need better controls as well as prevention technologies to make sure that we don't fall victim to so many of these traps that are being set for us to try and get us to leak data or leak credentials to hackers and bad third parties. So when we start thinking about securing human risk, one of the things that we all accept right now is that we've made a number of different choices in our technology stacks in every organization, from network to endpoint to identity to data and application. And each one of those tools brings us some level of knowledge of what's happening in our organization, some visibility. But what we hear time and time again is that leaders always still struggle to get a full picture across their entire organization. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that at the top of this stack is the human who's operating the keyboard, the human who's making decisions about how they collaborate. And that human is actually subject to three big things that are happening. First, they're always taking actions, right? And those actions could result in them sharing login credentials. It could end up, them causing to share a file to a personal file share, or things like clicking on fraudulent URLs. They're also constantly under attack. And we see this, and we'll share some data here in a moment. They're attacked with malicious attachments. They're targeted for social engineering attacks. We now more than ever are having to prevent those attacks from ending up in someone's user's email box before they could possibly make a mistake for them. And the last thing just to share is that these users have access. They have access to different applications in their organization that they use for sharing. And as you start thinking about all of these together, we firmly believe that by better understanding the human, we can improve security across all of these solutions together, while also giving a full picture of an organization around what kind of human risk are they subjecting our other users being put to right now. Now, this actually comes down and you break across the human risk problem and the challenge that sits behind it. There are really three discrete ways in which this is happening. First is through collaboration attacks and threats. These are the business email compromises, the phishing attacks that are happening. These are the exposed collaboration channels between organizations where data can move freely, almost without any kind of control that exists between those. The second thing that we see is there's a number of insider risk threats that are also occurring as well, including things like unmonitored data access, oversharing of information. I mean, we've all had these telltale stories of someone who's sharing a large file and up pops that little message box that said, would you like to share this via a link, right? And what you don't realize is with a single click, you're creating a public link for that user to be able to access that data, or just in general, just valuable data that's leaving an organization as well. And then finally, we're all subject to compliance requirements around archiving and retention, investigation, e-discovery, and then finally real-time monitoring and actions, which ultimately during an investigation, we still have to be able to understand everything that occurred in those moments to be able to investigate an incident or hopefully prevent one in that regard as well. And behind each one of these sits that human error that we're talking about. This comes in a combination of different ways. We think about users sometimes being repeat offenders, those who constantly are making mistakes, but we also find those risky and careless users that are sitting in an organization. Every so often, a malicious one that we need to take action upon. And then also just the target that they're under puts them under constant pressure. So all of this means that we need to figure out how do we mitigate these things together. And as you begin thinking about some of the risks and the statistics that underpin this, is that more than 90% of all these attacks are starting with email. 1 in 17 of those collaborative messages that are being sent around an organization contains sensitive data. And then perhaps the most important statistic when you think about human risk is that 8% of employee accounts for 80% of incidents. Think about that for a second. And today, maybe just a question for all of you that are on this webinar is today, how are you identifying that 8% that leads to 80%? What are you doing to determine what users are not following those best practices and make sure that they do? And then finally, we all know the financial impact of a data breach ends up to be in the millions. 15 million is the average cost of an insider data leak today. All 4 of these metrics here really lead you to a conclusion, and especially given the changes in technology, that we need to focus a lot more on protecting that human and making sure that data isn't being put at risk in our organization. So this is where the connected human risk management platform comes together. From a perspective of understanding, we need to take all of these API inputs from all of those different products that you've chosen already in your stack, non-Mimecast products, just to be clear, including things like CrowdStrike and SentinelOne, whatever you might have in your organization, to understand what's happening in your network and then process those kind of actions to understand the actions that users are taking, the attacks that you're being put under and subjected to, and the access that users are having. And through this, we're able to provide risk visibility, human intervention, and then adaptive protection, making sure that we take care of these users. And we'll be demonstrating that here in just a second. And then finally, as you pull this all together, we want to make sure that we work seamlessly in your security stack that exists today. You've made some choices in your security stack. Maybe it's a SIM or a SOAR that you rely upon heavily in your security operations center. At the end of this, we recognize we don't want you logging into a separate system to be able to get the kind of results that you need to be able to make decisions in your organization. We want to feed seamlessly into that and not only have product heroism through the choices we make in our product, but also ecosystem heroism to make sure that we're working alongside your tools as well. And this is how we define the human risk landscape. What we're paying attention to is the external threats, making sure that your users are protected from the outside in, while as you get to the right side of the circle, protect them from the inside out. And this defense in depth approach allows us to understand how humans are operating, make decisions about how to protect them, and then make sure that we're able to protect them when that time comes that they are under attack. This means that we're crossing a number of different solution stacks, from email and threat protection from the outside to data loss and insider threat, keeping the data that's in your organization so that your security and IT teams aren't surprised by data leak, loss, or theft. And then finally, providing this level of governance and compliance to make sure that all of this is auditable and enforced through controls in your organization. This isn't just in the endpoint. This isn't just in the cloud, and this isn't just for the SaaS applications that you're tying together. We've assembled a number of integrations as well as simple click connections to all of the major tools that you might be using today. And by providing this complete 360-degree view of everything that's happening in your organization tied to solutions that enforce all of this controls as well as prevention, we're able to provide a strong human risk outcome for you. We do this through 4 separate stacks that we have today: protecting collaboration through our collaboration security, our email security, and our DMARC analyzer; through insider risk with Mimecast Insider, acquired from Code 42. We're simplifying compliance through products like Cloud Archive, Search and Discover, Spotlight, and Signal, large number of these products through our Aware acquisitions. And then we're empowering users through Mimecast Engage, all through this risk management platform that we discussed a second ago. So we are focused on securing human risk by empowering organizations to protect that human layer. And now what I want to do is talk about how we implement an effective strategy to control human risk and take you through in a little bit more detail about how these products come together, inclusive of some demos and walkthrough of some of our products as well. So I started a little while ago saying that the most important thing we need to do is prevent users from that initial attack. We always want to thwart that before it occurs. And I'm always intrigued and based upon the number of data, since we actually inspect 1.8 billion emails per day, to understand the data points and what that's telling us. And today, email is still the number one threat vector for exploiting human behavior. 96% of phishing attacks originate from email. 94% of malware is delivered via email. Yet as you begin to understand this human behavior and you look in the center stack of statistics here, you'll notice that 28% of the average workday is spent reading and answering emails. That means that there's another 72% of a person's day that is not in email that we still need to protect, both from their actions that could result in them actually still getting hit by a phish or malware, but also through their actions in oversharing data or allowing data to leak externally to your organization. And with the number of data points that we've assembled here at Mimecast and the corpus of information that we sit behind here, we've been able to find some very significant trends in this, which we'll cover in an upcoming webinar as well. So if we all agree for a second here, it's not enough just to protect that largest threat vector, where it's only, again, as you think about it, 28% of users' activity. We want to protect all of the collaboration applications as well as all of the other work applications so that we can understand human behavior across not only our core security email agents, but also sentiment compliance, and then even getting down to data protection for this user. And by providing 100% coverage of the work applications that someone's doing and understanding 100% using our technologies about what's happening and apply control to them, we can prevent and protect 100% of the user. And that's what matters most to preventing these attacks. We've already discussed this, but as you think beginning pulling the strategy together, now I want to take it from strategy conversation to bringing it to life. And I'm going to actually start here by telling you a little bit of a story. And this story, by the way, is a real story that led to a breach for one of our customers, granted a while ago. So as you begin taking a look at the escalation of human risk, and I want you to imagine a graph that has a timeline going from left to right at the bottom axis, and over time, an axis that consists of risk from low to high. And obviously beyond high, we have our post-breach zone, if you will. And let's break this down into layers of risk. At the lowest level, we've got our safety zone. This is where we want everyone operating. This is where users are under the best behaviors that they could be under. And ideally, every user is operating in this ideal state. Now, as you begin thinking about this over time, as users begin to deviate, we start seeing users get up to levels of elevated risk. And then eventually a high risk zone, and heaven forbid, but the breach zone, which is obviously what we want to avoid before that happens. Now, we all know that users don't operate in the ideal state, right? We've all seen it, right? It manifests itself in the sense of the user all of a sudden says, hey, I could do this faster if I shared this file via Dropbox with this user. Or alternatively, like, I'm going to send this to my personal account, email account, and then I'm going to, hold this at home for later. All of those decisions lead to elevated levels of risk. So when you start thinking about what ends up happening is every time that a user takes an action that is potentially unsafe, and let's just say they share a file via Dropbox, it ends up increasing the user's level of risk. But here's the catch. If that user's level of risk increases and is not brought back down to that safety zone, they actually establish a new baseline of risk. Think about this for a second. If I use Dropbox to do my job faster and it ends up working, the next time that I have to do that activity, I'm going to use Dropbox again. And there's no security team today that has enough people to be able to handle every single one of these risks that's occurring. But here's the catch. It doesn't stop there. Pretty soon, now that I've established this new baseline of risk and I was able to actually use Dropbox to complete my job faster, I end up figuring out that I can, in fact, not have to complete my compliance training, or maybe I make a failed phishing test campaign in my organization. Either way you look at it, all the decisions that happen at this point end up increasing this level of risk of this user. And pretty soon, we were talking about that 8% of users that lead to 80% of your problems. One user, if not corrected, ends up having these repeat offenses that establish brand new levels of baselines of risk. And at some point, it's going to lead them clicking on a phishing email, and it's going to end up with a user that is in breach. We don't want that. And again, as you come back to that core statistic, that is the 8% of your users that lead to 80% of your risk. And that's where we want to be able to answer questions for you all about who is my targeted user? Who are my repeat offenders? Who are the users that begin to demonstrate that elevated level of risk? And how do I address them in a scalable way to be able to deal with those issues before they become problems and damage my organization? So as you think about this, our opportunity here is to shift left and apply prevention across all of those human risks that are occurring in your organization. So let's re-envision this escalation of human risk. And let's take this exact same user where they actually shared a file via Dropbox. And I want you to imagine if all of a sudden this user, maybe in their Slack or Teams instance, receives some kind of notice that actually corrects their drifted behavior. And as a result of that behavior correction, it brings them back to the safety zone. It took what was an elevated baseline of risk and brought them back into a safe operating context where they understand how security practices should be followed within your organization so that they can make sure that they don't make mistakes as they go forward as well. That's what we want to get to. So when you think about handling human risk at scale, we've already said that there is no security team in the world that has enough people and time to be able to handle every risk. Yet at the same time, human risk solutions, our goal is to make sure that we automate all of that handling of those low, moderate, and high risks so that you can continue to focus on the risks that you have to deal with, the critical risks that your organization is facing that you need to investigate, while we come alongside of this from a human risk management perspective and handle all these lows, these moderates, and these high-level risks so that you don't have to. So let me show you this at work and begin to connect this journey and this story together for you. And to do this, like I said before, I'm actually going to show you some product. So for many of you who are using email security, the screen that I'm showing right now looks very familiar for you. I'm currently looking at our analysis and response overview. And on the email security front, we are constantly examining every single one of those emails for the risks that exist within them. That's the 1.8 billion emails a day that we're paying attention to. And in each one of these, we understand the risks that are occurring, like malware, phishing, things that we don't want to have coming into users. But as you begin thinking about these detections that we have, we can also begin to start understanding who are our top targeted users. And at the same time, who are the ones that are constantly being put under attack through just the regular operations that are coming in through email. Now, this is a vital step for us to begin to understand human risk. And it starts with the prevention of making sure that users aren't clicking on malware and phishing. But we also know that we have to go a lot further beyond this. And as you begin seeing some of our connected products, and as we bring this vision together here for all of human risk, I can quickly jump into our Engage product, where I'm now able to begin to understand how are users responding to all of the attempts that for phishing simulations that we're doing inside of our organization, or for that matter, how do I view the compliance that our users are being put through? Now, within here with Engage, we can see really quickly what kind of users have unwatched videos. We can see which ones are actually lagging in all of the information that we've asked them to pay attention to. And we do focus this around micro educational training, which is so critical. We make it very easy for people to have these short training videos that allow them to understand what kind of risks they're facing and make sure that we give them proper instruction for them how to resolve those risks as well. Now, this all comes back to human risk. And like I said before, through these products that I'm showing you right now, we're constantly taking in data points to understand who's under attack, who is following the best security practices in our organization. And within our human risk dashboard, now we're able to see this come to life. We begin taking all of the data from these other connected products that we have to understand our human risk score. how our organization is trending over time relative to the risks that we're being put under by external attacks. And now through this human risk dashboard, we're starting to understand, for example, who are the most attacked users in our organization? Who are the ones that could be at a higher elevated level of risk just by the sheer volume that those users are being put under? But at the same time, we also now can understand our risk across the organization through a number of different categories to understand not only human risk score, but what level of attack are they under? What kind of training has this user done? And all of these things allow us to begin to understand what kind of risk buckets that our users are fitting into. And we can then make some intelligent decisions about how to better protect these users as well. The final picture, as I begin showing you this today, comes through Code 42, where now we can see all of this data coming together. Now, for those of you that haven't seen Insider before, this is now Mimecast Insider. And what you're taking a look at right now is literally what we showed you on that previous slide, the critical alerts that are actually being fired inside of your organization that we need you to pay attention to. But we're also giving you the risky activities that we're seeing, where there is no rule, there is no alert, there's no policy that you had to configure for this to be able to be visible to you. Rather, we're computing those risks in real time alongside those human risk scores for us to understand maybe where you should be paying attention, but also we're taking action on your behalf for these users as well. So let me give you a little bit of a story here. And as I share this story with you, it's important for me to recognize I'm going to give you first my own personal story, and then we'll hop into another story here and actually walk through a little bit of an investigation. A little while ago, over a year ago now, I was actually using Insider and I shared a file publicly. Now, I've got to tell you, it was funny because at the time that I did this, I was doing it for a specific purpose, but I was a little surprised because moments after I ended up sharing that file, I ended up getting this Slack delivered to me, which essentially stated, "Hi, this is an automated response from the Insider Risk team. We received an alert that you shared this particular file publicly from our Code 42 Google Drive. And here's a link to the file. But imagine this was ending up in a user Slack or Teams instance. The moment that they actually take an action, we're able to have a conversation with them around the situation that just presented itself and tell them, was this intentional? And in this particular case, this was yes, it was okay to be public. But at the same time, if I had said, no, this shouldn't be public, then we're able to prompt that user with microeducational training that's very, very laser targeted, just barely over a minute in total duration, to say why the action that they just performed was against policy and what they need to do in the future to stay within policy. And as it come back to this is something we call situational lessons. And what we've essentially designed in our products is for every single one of those, and reactive lessons too, for every single one of those changes that occur for a user, we make them more aware of what they need to be doing under those situations, but also what they need to be doing in the future from a reactive perspective. So just as an example here, we all have departing employees, and I think we all know this, but departing employees have a tendency to take data with them. If I did a straw poll right now on this webinar, I would expect over 66% of you to tell me that you actually took data from one employer to the next. Don't worry, it's common. We see it all the time, but it has to be stopped. So in this particular case, as a user would, for example, be moved into a departing employee bucket, we're then able to interact with that user with this microeducational video telling them, this is what we expect from our departing employees from a perspective of information protection. And we're doing this not just for general employees, but rather we have persona developed ones for things like departing employees that are developers versus salespeople and marketing people. So we can make sure that they understand that a lot of their code or their customer contact list, product roadmaps are all covered by the intellectual property agreements that they have with your organization. Now, I also mentioned responsive lessons. And just a second ago, you saw one where I had an external public sharing link. But under each one of these, if your organizations today is limiting, for example, uses of external devices, we've got these in micro instructional lessons that allow us in real time, when we see that user begin to make mistakes, we're able to push these lessons out to those users to correct that behavior, that drift in that cultural norm that we want to enforce, and bring those users directly back to the norm that we expect them to have. Across the board, we've got countless videos through Engage that we're able to deliver to these users to correct that human risk and that behavior so that your scores stay low and your users stay safe. Now, let me go through a couple other examples here. And I just wanted to show you here a couple other data points as human risk comes together. If you notice here in the upper right-hand corner, I'm looking at my top users by critical activity. And I've already established right now that that's really the definition of things that I don't know about that in here, Mimecast is saying you need to pay attention to. Now, as you look down this list here, there's a lot of red flags, but the first one I want to draw your attention to is Jennifer Vang. You'll notice up here that Jennifer Vang is a contractor. She's on a Tiger project. And through our email security capabilities, we've identified the fact that Jennifer Vang is a phishing or malware target. And as we begin looking over here at these critical events, normally if a user is doing something that is an aberrant behavior, we expect a very low number of those events. The moment that we start seeing a user in this case that has 226 critical events, as an administrator, I can begin to question whether or not that this user actually might be compromised in my organization. As we are able to click in here, we're able to understand what kind of risks that this particular event has and drilling down into the exact files that Jennifer Vang is sharing. And if I wanted to go deeper, I can literally get into every file here, understand the path that it took through my organization, down to the actual where a file was acquired to, where it was sent to, and even understand, for example, personal email addresses and the risks that are occurring. Now, as you begin thinking about the picture of human risk, and today I just demonstrated one specific scenario for you. What we're actually seeing is organizations use our best practices to go even deeper. So that when Jennifer Vang was actually put on this phishing malware target list, we're able to reach out to Jennifer Vang with a Slack message that simply says, through no fault of your own, we can tell that you are currently under attack via phishing. As a result of this, we want to make sure we inform you and tell you some of the best practices that we'd like you to think about as you look at every email here going forward. But then secondarily, we're going to surround Jennifer Vang with a couple controls to make it so that if for any reason there is an issue, we're able to catch it in real time and prevent it. As an example of this too, and just to give you a couple other concrete use cases here that we see organizations do today, as I begin taking a look at these watch lists, you can see here a whole bunch of different users and the context of these users, from users that are departing and contractors, as well as users that might have failed our phishing test, but also things like our phishing malware targets. We saw this with Jennifer Vang just a second ago as we were going through this scenario. Now, as we look through this list right here, one of the things that we're able to do, and especially for things like repeat offenders, let's take repeat offenders. These are the people who constantly you're telling them, don't touch the hot stove, yet still they touch the hot stove. These users, we want to start applying some level of friction to their operations. One, to make sure that the data that they're doing and the actions that they're taking are conscious decisions that they mean to be taking. But then secondarily, we also want to make sure that we're providing some level of control over them so that we're bringing them back to those cultural norms. And the good news here is that these repeat offenders, once these repeat offender activities that they're doing are under control, those controls go away. It gives the user an incentive to essentially align themselves with the best practices of the organization. Now, I happen to be in a repeat offenders demo list here at Mimecast, but what we're able to do for these users is actually begin to provide these controls, for example, that actually reminds them when they upload a file to an untrusted location, did you mean to do this? And interrupt their flow, just asking them a very simple question. This includes things like pasting the browsers. We could block specific browsers. We could block private browsing. We could block the removable media on their endpoints. We can even block cloud sharing. This takes the controls beyond just those micro educational lessons that we were discussing before, and it drives us deeper into actual actions that prevent the user from making these mistakes in the first place. Now, I've got a demo folder up right now, and just to give you an example of what this looks like to a user, I'm going to go ahead, and if you notice here, I've got my personal account up here. I'm going to go ahead and grab a file that's off my desktop here and drop this right onto the desktop to upload this file. Now, again, right now I've got controls in place saying, Rob, you're not doing the right things. I just want to make sure what you're doing is what you mean to do. And as you see, it just blocked this upload going to my Google Drive instance. And it's reminding me here that this destination isn't allowed by my security team. If you trust it, if you're doing the right things, great. But I just wanted to provide just this awareness to you that you're making a decision to move something in a different way than we intended. Now, in this case, I'm actually doing this to complete tasks for my jobs. I'm going to go ahead and self-elevate my permissions to be able to go outside of this. But we are logging this and paying attention to it in that human risk calculation so that we understand when users are going around policy. And especially from a repeat offender perspective, we want to make sure that we're investigating and understanding that. So now I'm going to take that exact same file that we just saw a second ago, and I'm going to grab this file and drop this here. And you'll notice that this is successful. At the end of this, we've applied a little bit of friction to this human risk challenge, right? But at the end of it, we're getting compliance back. And in that example that we shared before, where we were walking through all of those controls as well as the risks that users are facing, we're now able to bring users back to that common cultural norm that we're expecting, and we're able to manage and protect these users. Now, at the end of this, as I said before, I just went through a very quick demonstration and used about 5 tools that are in the human risk management platform for us to actually drive behavioral change and microeducational adjustments to behavior inside of an organization to prevent risks from occurring. Now, today's demo was a very quick demo, but at the end of this is how we bring together the combination of our solutions to secure human risk and make sure that your organization is free from those humans that maybe make those errors that ultimately puts you at risk as well and your data too. So I said we were going to have a couple minutes here for Q&A, and we do just have a couple minutes here from Q&A. I know my Mindcasters have been watching my little chat feed pop up on the right side of my screen saying that we've been answering a number of your questions during today's webinar. But I wanted to take a couple key questions that have been pulled aside right now in the chat. So let me pull these up from my list here. The first question is discussing trends in data. I mentioned that we have 1.8 billion data points that we look at on a daily basis just around email alone. And by the way, we have so many data points beyond just the 8 billion data points from email alone. They include other points like exfiltration data, where we are actually north of 2 billion data points every 90 days that we understand. So it does provide us this huge corpus of data that sits behind here. And the question is around the data and the trends, what are you seeing in the industry or the different things that are occurring that we should be aware of? Now, listen, not to ruin the surprise, one of the upcoming human risk seminars that we're doing as part of this 4-part series is actually on data. We will walk through the empirical data that we see in our products, as well as understand how these things are coming together to change those risks in the security landscape over time. I won't steal any of the thunder, but I will give you a couple highlights. First and foremost, I would tell you that in the past, what we've seen is that data risks have typically occurred from an exfiltration perspective around cloud sharing. And what we've now seen is that in the last year and a half, we've seen source code become something that is highly exfiltrated out of organizations, and unfortunately not in good ways, right? It's not collaboration to open source tools. Rather, it is people taking source code to their personal accounts or to even personal repositories out there. And I would say right now, the data is pointing to the fact that on the exfiltration side, that source code exfiltration, as well as customer data exfiltration, is massively on the rise. And that salespeople and other people who have access to that customer data as a trend continues to show that data is going elsewhere. Now, I didn't cover any of the source code exfiltration during today's webinar, but at the same time, it is a very powerful vector that we cover, where we manage every single repository versus understanding personal versus corporate repositories, and tying deeply into the GitHub routers on the endpoints for us to understand where data is going. The second big trend that I'll share with you is that as we discuss email side of the equation, is that the attacks are also getting a lot more sophisticated as it relates to email. And now we're starting to see users who are receiving phishing emails that are AI generated, that are very specific, that are tied to the user, that are very personal. And it's becoming harder for users to distinguish what is good email versus bad email. This is part of the reason why Advanced BEC was brought to light for us here at Mimecast, and why that product has been so efficient for our customers to be able to prevent attacks coming from the outside as well. But for the rest of this question, I'm going to ask everyone to hang on to one of our upcoming webinars, where we're going to dive deeper into these trends, and we'll be answering this question more fully for you there too. The second question here, I'm going to interpret just a little bit. But the second question is how do we begin to highlight the risks that are occurring for our board as well as our leaders inside of our organization? It's really based around, what kind of risk and how do we bring this to light for them? And this is a great question, by the way, and I'll share with you today. Across all of the products, we've got these wonderful dashboards that allow us to tell organizations what kind of risk are they being put under, and what does it look like from a targeted user risk as well, right? I mean, I can see this user here as example is being targeted by a large number of phishing emails, and that's the user that we want to make sure that we protect and also bring their awareness up so that they understand that they're under attacks as well. At the same time, we see a lot more organizations begin to understand how data is being exfiltrated outside of their organization. There's a number of different things that we do. We often see a graph like this. I like to call this one the golden rule of data exfiltration. Essentially, what the golden rule is defined as is when important data to your organization is being exfiltrated to low integrity destinations. That's where we're raising up a lot of these alarms to you through across our products to bring your attention to them. But in any organization, what we want to understand is how are things happening over time. And for this reason, we have a series of trends dashboards that take it down and begin to look by quarter, by month. You can break this down however you'd like. What kind of data is leading your organization, and where is that data coming from and going to? It allows you, when you walk into your leaders or as a CISO walking into a board of directors, to be able to discuss how are the controls that you're taking in count and that you're implementing in your organization, ultimately filtering down into meaningfully changing the risk profile of your organization. So once again, there's plenty of ways to be able to answer this question, as well as be able to bring data back to your organization. But ultimately, what we want to see is a less risky organization over time. And a lot of our trends capabilities are able to drive that for you. This next question, really simple. This looks like a lot to integrate. It's not. In fact, there's a number of different things that we do as we get into an organization, tying the collaboration tools. And it's normal for Mimecast Insider, as an example, in a 1-hour meeting, for us to be able to deploy the entire solution, tie to Microsoft OneDrive, Google Drive, and as well as Salesforce and other tools in your organization. It really is simple, and it's very easy for you to get this fully integrated. But that 1-hour promise is something that we live by. So I promise you, while I showed you today a lot of tools and a lot of things that we're tying together, this isn't work that you have to do. The setup is really simple for you to be able to implement our tools and technology in your organization to get up and running, and then instantly begin adding protection to your users in your environment. Okay, the last question I'm going to answer here is how do you roll this out? And this one's a common question that I get, and I'm grateful that someone asked this question, because in a lot of ways, when you take a technologies into your organization, you have to be very mindful about how do you roll this technology out and how do you implement it. And what I love telling people is that, we always do proof of values with all of our prospects. We spend time understanding what are the most valuable use cases that you have in your organization. And during those POVs, we really focus around targeting one specific use case. We start highlighting the data that we're seeing, but we also have a plan of action that shows you how to be able to take better control of that as you move forward. And I will tell you, it becomes a very, very quick process at that point for the wash, rinse, and repeat cycle, if you will, where we see organizations start with a single use case, focusing around some level of controls, and they go deeper and deeper and deeper into their organization. And the beauty of this is here at Mimecast, we have these best practices. I showed you one of them today around targeted phishing. But at the same time, we have numerous different policy or best practices to implement so that you can take those best practices, put them to work in your organization, and protect your users. All right, everyone, listen, we've come to the end of our time together. And for all of you, those that were asking questions that we didn't get to, we're going to be happy to follow up with you after today's webinar to get back with you to be able to close those out as well. But on behalf of everybody, I just want to take a moment to thank you all. One, welcoming you into 2025. But as we look back in 2024, we understand so many of those challenges that all of you are running into. And here at Mimecast, we're focused around human risk management and driving those risks out of your business. Just want to thank you for your time again today and look forward to talking to you all next. Have a wonderful day.